Hello, everybody. My name is Hwachol Son from Handong Global University, and this is the class of research ethics for the professors who join into the Unitwin UOI project. Today, I will be talking about the importance of citation. Especially for those who research and teach students, so that we will agree on the importance of citation and how the research community has to conduct. Okay, the learning objective of this class is to understand the rationale of citation, which means why do we need to give citation? And also we will be talking about the concept of plagiarism. And of course, plagiarism is not a good thing. So we will talk about how to avoid the plagiarism, okay? Now, let's begin with the purpose of a citation. Why do we give citation? Now, in all the research work, we have to give citation. So give references, tell others or readers or students which reference we have used to prepare the material that we provide. Now, there are several reasons, but I picked up three different reasons. One is to appreciate the colleague who presented new ideas and won the competition within academia. That means if somebody has written a paper or research work, right, then somebody has created that, and we need to express our appreciation. Thank you for finding out the discovery, finding out the things that you have provided. And also we have to acknowledge that the things that I have been telling or writing here is not from myself, but from somebody else's, okay? So when it is a new idea, we have to provide the source of the new idea and make it clear that it is that new idea, or that idea itself is not from myself, but from somebody else, some authors, some other scholars, okay? And this is one way of give congratulation to other people, okay? The reason is that in research community or in academia, there is a kind of competition, and that competition is competition for finding new ideas. So if somebody has found a new idea, then they need to get prize. And what is the prize? Of course, there is a prize of publication, for example, but also there is another kind of prize that is only provided by academic community, and that is citation. Okay, I have learned this material from this book or this article. Okay, now another reason for providing citation is to provide readers or students with the source of my study. So in order to teach or in order to write a paper, academic paper, I need to study, right? When I finish my study, I have to give my presentation or my paper, and there I provide all the informations that I have used in order to study this. So in order to learn this, I read this book, read that article or that newspaper. Okay, so let's provide other people information. And the third one is also quite important, and is provide other people the means to checking on me. Okay, so I have read this article or book and I presented this, and I expose myself to other people. I have read this book and I present this. Examine me whether I have interpreted this material correctly. Okay, so these are the three different the regions or purpose of citation. Now, when do we need when do we need to provide citation? Yeah, well, I mean, basically when you write a book or paper, you have to provide the citation. Also, when you present in a in academic meetings, then you have to provide the references, right? Also, sometimes if you use some material from other sources, then you have to give it to the students sometimes. Yeah, this material is it's been used or it was borrowed from this article or that article. Okay, in most area where you are supposed to provide creative works, right, a citation is very important for the reasons that I have just I told you. Okay, now this is not a morality or decency. It's not matter of attitude. It's very important rule. It's rule among academic people, among professors, researchers. So if you are a professional researcher or professor, you have to provide citation. If you didn't do that, then you will be in a bit of trouble because you do not follow the rule of academia. If you are a football player and you break the rule in football, then you are in trouble. Outside of football ground, grab the ball with your hands is no problem. But if you do that in the football game, that's problem, right? Because it's a football rule. Now, giving citation within academia in university is very important. If you go to other places, that might not be that important. However, if you are in university or in your academic circle, then it is very important to give proper citation. If you didn't, then you will be in trouble because they call that plagiarism. Okay. Now, sometimes people ask, do we have to cite when we use contents from Wikipedia, which is open to everybody, or some blogs that's also public, or just borrow photos from the internet? Well, this is very important question, actually. The answer is yes. Even the material came from Wikipedia, you cannot just copy and paste it. You have to, I mean, you may copy and paste, but at the end of the material, you have to write down that this material from here to here, I have, borrowed, copied from Wikipedia. You have to just make it clear that everybody knows. If you didn't do that, then other people, the readers or students, might think that the contents came out of you. That means that you have created those contents. People would believe that, but that's wrong. That's not true, right? So you simply have to provide where this came from. Also, there is some problem of the license in the case of photos. You cannot use any photos from the internet. That's not true. There are some photos that you can use, some photos that is licensed. So you have to give some fee for using that. Okay, so let me give you an example that from my presentation. That was a presentation that I have used. I need to have to find a photo from ARPAGO. Yeah, and around the red circle, you will see the small the URL. That is address. That is where that's the source of the photo. Okay, so I borrowed that photo from Flickr, then and the site says that this particular photograph is for free. You can use it. If you download it, it's okay. You have to check these things. Okay, so otherwise you will be in breach with intellectual property, and sometimes that can lead to a problem. Okay, so the simple kind of logic is this: if the idea or photos or contents, if it is not yours, just tell that it is not yours. Okay, so that's pretty simple, I think. Now, if you didn't provide an information that the material didn't came from you, then it is plagiarism. Yeah. So if you do not provide proper citation, it is called plagiarism. And taking other researchers' achievement as one's own, because if you didn't notice that other people would think that this content is that came from you, right? So that then is a problem. So people call that academic theft. Yeah. So it is a serious issue, not in the general public realm, but in academic society, it is a very big deal, and you should not plagiarize. Now, then why do they plagiarize? There are some people who plagiarize, apparently. Now, in the past, plagiarism was not a big deal. It was not a big deal in a traditional society. But now these days, now there's a lot of competition within academic world, and intellectual property issue became a serious issue these days because some ideas can lead to money or position or many other things, right? So now it is related to financial interest. So the kind of general atmosphere has changed. Yeah. So people got more sensitive than before. So in the middle age, plagiarism was not a big deal. But now in contemporary society, if it is not yours, then you should not pretend that it is yours. Okay. Now then, why do they plagiarize, right? Because some of them are not yet that sensitive. Some of the people think, wow, that's not a problem. I've studied, I present this, what's the problem? So they are not sensitive and they don't know the seriousness of this issue. That's why. And also, but there are more malicious intent. That's bad. That's even worse. And that's the case when you are pressurized that you have to write something, you have to submit something, and you haven't done anything because you have been very busy. Then you just borrow other people's work and then pretend it is as if you have made it. Yeah. And that can be connected with the career, connected with a financial problem. Well, but even if the situation is kind of urgent, you should not, take somebody else's work as if it is yours. That is very, very important. In whatever documents you make, it is related to academic work, then you should make it very clear that, which part is yours and which part is not yours. Okay, that's, Okay, just let's go a little bit further about the definition of plagiarism. Now, Wikipedia here, I quoted from Wikipedia. It says, plagiarism is the representation of another author's language, thoughts, ideas, or expressions as one's own original work without appropriate citation. Now, it's not complicated. If it is not yours, then you have to give notice to that, and that's citation. If you didn't give the notice, then you have plagiarized. Okay. Now, not only the text, but also structures of original writing could be plagiarized. Of course, there is a common kind of ways of writing. For example, you have to put conclusion at the end of the paper. So that's very common structure. So then, when you write conclusion, this structure came from somebody, you don't need to do that. But if the structure of the paper is quite unique and creative, and you used that particular structure out of other people's work, you get idea from that, then you have to write it down. The structure of this paper came from another paper written by somebody, right? And you have to write all down. And I got idea from that. If you have clarified that, then there's no other problem. That's fine. Yeah. So remember that using other people's material is okay. It's not wrong. It's common in academia. However, what is important is that you provide the information, the notice, the acknowledgement that you have borrowed that content from somebody. Okay. And it's not a matter of writing something exactly the same as the original material, even if you paraphrased or summarized, that's not important. I mean, even if you paraphrased, you have to give citation. Okay, if you didn't, that's plagiarism. Now, there's an unclear or misleading citation is also plagiarism. Now, when you copied exactly the same sentence from somewhere, you have to give very specific location of the citation. So it's not enough that you provide the name of the book, but you have to give the page numbers from which you borrowed that sentence or the idea or thought or expressions. Okay, so you know, the simple principle is that as specific as possible when you give a citation. Okay, actually, I have divided this lecture into two parts. So this first part is about the importance of citation and what is the rationale of the citation. But in the next lecture, I will explain, I will give you more examples of how you give citation in academic work. Okay, good. Now, sometimes people say, I get permission from the original author. So, so I don't need to give citation, but that is wrong. Okay, so you know the author of a book and you kind of borrowed one paragraph from that book and just put it into your own article. Yeah, but you know the author of the book. So you asked the author, can I borrow one sentence or paragraph from your book? Is that okay that I use your material there? And the author says somehow, yes, why not? You know, please do it. So you just copied one paragraph or some part of the work into your paper, and you didn't write down the name of the original author because he allowed or she allowed. Well, you know, even if the person gave you permission, that does not mean that you don't need to give citation. You have to give citation because citation is not about the agreement between you and original author, but it is a rule about academic work. Okay. So, so it is very important. Permission from the original author is irrelevant. It's nothing to do with the right of you plagiarize. Okay. As I said, the similarity of the sentence, whether the sentence is exactly the same as the original sentence, that's not important. What is important is the general idea. Okay. Of course, that idea, if that idea is so common knowledge, then it's okay. You don't need to, you know, give citation. But the idea is quite original idea from that particular author. You have to make it very clear. Okay. And also you have to provide the source. Now, in the case of Wikipedia, of course, it's general knowledge in a sense, but it's quite extensive sometimes. But if you have borrowed that from there, you just simply give the citation that you have borrowed that from Wikipedia. Okay. Now, there are sometimes say, you know, I forgot. I meant to, you know, give citation when I writing, but I was busy writing, so I just borrow a sentence from here and from there. And later I forgot to mention that book. Well, that cannot be an excuse. So you have to be very careful when you are accused of plagiarism to say that it was mistake. That doesn't mean anything. Okay, once you are accused, then it can be a serious problem in the academia. Okay. And sometimes people ask that, I wrote something, and by chance, this idea was exactly the same as the author's idea. That can happen, but very rarely. So if you are a good scholar, then when you write something, you have done enough research, right? If you have done your research, then the idea, if somebody else had a similar idea, you must have known that, and you have to write that down, meaning that you write your idea and then you give a footnote saying, well, somebody else, the Mr. A had the same idea, similar idea with me. However, his idea is slightly different in the sense of this or that, right? So you have to refer to the other people's idea. But when you are accused of plagiarism, sometimes people say, well, I wrote the sentence, but I didn't know about another author, and he or she wrote the same sentence somehow. So, by chance, it became exactly the same. Well, statistically speaking, that doesn't happen, right? That it's very rare that that kind of case happens. If it happens, then it is quite, quite surprising thing. People should be very curious about that, right? But normally, that doesn't happen. Okay. Now, all judgment on plagiarism should be made by academia of the given field, not news reporters, not new reporters. Sorry, that was a typo. News reporters. Now, sometimes, especially in Korea, where I live, there's a lot of accusation of plagiarism, and plagiarism issue appears when there is some political issue, not academic issue. But so many news reporters come and say, about plagiarism, about the scholars. But that's not very appropriate. Plagiarism is, first of all, the problem within academia, academic circles. So the judgment, whether some sentence or book is plagiarized or not, that judgment should be made by academic themselves, or the group of academics, not by other lay people. Okay, so it's more about the academic world. Okay, so how can we avoid plagiarism? Plagiarism is bad. So how shall we avoid that? Well, as I said, it is pretty simple, by providing proper citation. Okay, it's very simple. So if you have borrowed material from somebody else's, then just write it down. That's and there's a form that we will be talking about in the next lecture. Okay, so you provide proper information to other people so that your reader or your audience will know that the material that you are using, this part at least, certain part, is not your own, but from somebody else's. Well, that's good enough. Okay, so through appropriate citation, one can know, other people can know what she or he learned from where and what is his or her own idea. Okay, so this is my idea. This is other people's idea. Sometimes, in many cases, very often in academic journals, the articles say A said this, B said this, C said this, and gave all the citations. And then I kind of combined A's idea, B's idea, and C's idea, and this is my idea, right? So there's a lot of citation, but at the end, there is always my original thoughts or ideas. Yeah, that's how academic work works. Okay. Now then, when somebody plagiarized my work, what shall I do? Well, I didn't do anything, so I'm sure that you guys are not. You don't plagiarize other people's work unless you have, no idea of what plagiarism is, but once you have heard, this lecture, this my talk, then you will know what plagiarism is. So we will not plagiarize other people's work. But what happens if you became the victim of plagiarism? You have written something and somebody, kind of steal your idea and use for as if it is their own. So what should you do? Now, the simple thing is to report to the relevant institutions, right? So all academic journals have their own system of checking plagiarism, okay? So they have, so if you have some problem with your plagiarism, you can report to the journal when that person has published. I have experienced that I was in a committee of an academic journal where there was accusation of plagiarism. Somebody plagiarized somebody else's work and then published into the journal that I worked for, right? Then the committee will gather together and check whether this is really plagiarism or not, and then give back to the person who accused, okay? Of course, when you say your work is plagiarized by somebody else, you cannot just say, claim that without evidence. You have to provide the evidence that your original work was this, and the other person's plagiarized the work was that. You have to, you can simply compare these two parts, right? So you have to provide the evidence, right? Then the journal will investigate and get back to you. And when the allegation is proven to be true, then the article will be canceled. It will be deleted from the list of the list of journal articles. Okay. In the case of book, if somebody else is plagiarized your work and wrote a book, then probably you have to report that to academic society or the university that the other author works for. Okay, so there are several ways. In each country there are different systems of dealing with plagiarism, but when you find out that your work is plagiarized by somebody else, then you have to find a proper place to report. Okay, that's it for today. This lecture. I have tried to explain why we provide a citation in academia. I gave you the three purposes of citation and why we give citation in academic world, and why is so important in our research life. And also I provide the definition of plagiarism, right? So, and I explained in detail what is plagiarism. It's not simply copying words, but it's about sometimes ideas and structures and other things, right? So if that idea did not come from you, then you should not pretend that it is yours, as if it is yours. And also I provided how to avoid plagiarism. So in order for you to avoid plagiarism, simply give proper citation, right? But in the case that your work is plagiarized by somebody else, then you have to find a right institution to find to report that and give them give them the chance to investigate and give judgment. Okay. Okay, thank you for your attention. Here is my email address. Then you have to if you have any questions, please let me know, then I will get back to you. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.